This was one of the most popular comments I received on my video asking why Colleen Hoover gets so much hate. Now, the 3 Colleen Hoover books I read did not have that element, thank goodness, because I find it to be extremely disgusting. Which takes me to another book I often see on Book Talk that is so over the top in romanticizing abuse, yet I only ever see praise for it. And that book is Credence. Major spoiler alert, but this book is about a newly 18-year-old girl who loses her V card to her guardian, who also happens to be her step-uncle. And then by the end of the book, she ends up with and has a baby with her rapist, who also happens to be the son of said uncle. So why do I only ever hear people talking about how amazing this book is when I think it romanticizes abuse in the most disgusting way?
The one genre which is female-dominated, both in its audience and creators, is romance. Not only does this explain why the genre is often not taken seriously, but this also reflects how society trains women to prioritize romance as a life goal over all other ideals, such as intellectualism.
The ultimate goal for any woman is marriage. No matter what any woman says, a successful life for a woman is getting married to the best quality man possible and retaining that man till death. Trying to hide the facts and aiming to be some kind of boss lady instead of settling down is just going to push you down the pecking order for high quality successful men later on down the line.
A patriarchal society tells women that their value comes in their service to others, primarily through their relationship of mother and wife. Ergo, romantic fulfillment is often placed above other forms of self-satisfaction, and for generations has been presented as the only method of fulfillment for women. Doing so, however, does not lead to the promised happiness, as was revealed in Impet et al.'s 2008 study, which found that women who prioritize romantic fulfillment over other types of fulfillment tend to experience lower levels of overall life satisfaction. Feeding into this, Sheldon and Kasser's 1995 study, Coherence and Congruence, 2 Aspects of Personality Integration, found that women who prioritize romantic fulfillment over other types of fulfillment tend to be less likely to pursue their personal goals and aspirations.
The happiest people on earth are unmarried women who don't have children.
Why are unmarried, childless women so happy? Let's talk about it. A professor at the London School of Economics found that these women had a couple of reasons for why they were so happy. The first was that they had really strong bonds with people outside of their romantic relationships, meaning they had friends. Secondly, they also had more control over their time. They had more control over their lifestyle. The study also found that men do incredibly well when they're married. Married men showed really high levels of life satisfaction, and they did better health-wise, mentally and physically, and emotionally, whereas women who were married and had children did not. What's up with that discrepancy? One of my theories is that women tend to run a household alone. A lot more women are working a full-time job, and they're also taking on household work. There's also social network erosion. We're lonelier than ever before. We might feel unsupported and unfulfilled.
In other words, prioritizing romantic fulfillment leads to less happiness and less overall personal fulfillment. What is described as romantic is often abusive and harmful, which serves to further normalize the unhappiness and self-sacrifice often required of women when they fill the roles of mother and wife. This is particularly evident in the tropes presented in the romance genre. The question arises, why is so much of what is presented as romantic overtly harmful to women's safety and happiness? Quite simply, the romanticization of abusive behaviors allows women to feel special through being the object of desire, which normalizes the cycle of harm perpetuated through the roles of wife and mother. Most romances follow a similar pattern: meet, date, marry, have kids. The resolution of many romances ends before the final act of domesticity, perhaps because while the act of pregnancy might still hold promise of romance and love, the actual act of having children is far more exhausting. However, before romance truly blooms, there is often a period of struggle wherein one or both parties must fight for their love. At times, this is due to societal expectations, such as differences in wealth or race. However, a very common trope is the taming of the man. The heroine must fight to soothe the problems of her prospective partner before they can truly get together, and in doing so, often turns down a safer alternative partner. In Reading the Romance, Women, Patriarchy, and Popular Culture, the author suggests that the cruelty and indifference that the hero exhibits towards the heroine in the early parts of the novel are really of no consequence because they actually originated in love and affection. The romance effectively asserts that there are other signs for these two emotions than the traditional ones of physical caresses, oral professions of commitment, and thoughtful care. In other words, it presents abusive behavior as normal and often as desired, as though those traits are merely how males express attraction and love, rather than being abusive actions. This can be seen in many romance movies, such as Twilight, where Edward sneaking into Bella's room was portrayed as a protective action instead of one akin to the possession of a stalker, or how Derek from Grey's Anatomy is possessive over Meredith even when they aren't together, despite that being his choice. Male anger, threats of violence, and implications of assault are common in the romance genre.
It's incredibly dangerous to leave an abuser because the final step in the domestic violence pattern is kill her. Over 70% of domestic violence murders happen after the victim has ended the relationship, because then the abuser has nothing left to lose. Other outcomes include long-term stalking, even after the abuser remarries, denial of financial resources, and manipulation of the family court system to terrify the victim and her children. And still we ask, why doesn't she just leave? I was able to leave because of one final sadistic beating that broke through my denial. I realized that the man who I loved so much was going to kill me if I let him. So I broke the silence. I told everyone. The police, my neighbors, my friends and family, total strangers. And I'm here today because you all helped me. Abuse thrives only in silence. You have the power to end domestic violence simply by shining a spotlight on it.
And these implications go far beyond the silver screen. In real life, many ask why women stay with abusive men, and yet seem to ignore how, regardless of the extremity of the misogyny exhibited by their heroes, then, romances all suggest in the end that when properly interpreted, masculinity implies only good things for women. It is a sign of sexual difference and thus a fundamental condition for the love, marriage, and attention women seek. When romances are understood as the experimental projection of the consequences of masculine behavior and patriarchal control, it seems possible that certain writers do not depict extreme violence out of a masochistic desire to experience it vicariously. Rather, their preoccupation with misogyny may be the mark of a desperate need to know that exaggerated masculinity is not life-threatening to women. They may also want to know that this trait need not be deplored actively because such a response would undoubtedly prompt its even more vicious expression and jeopardize the all-important protection that it is positive consequence. Behavior like Brant Newcomb's may be incorporated into the romantic fantasy, therefore, not because certain writers and readers enjoy it, but because they cannot imagine it away. To them, such behavior may seem so natural, permanent, and unassailable that they hunger even more for a fantasy that will contradict their suspicions and convince them that it can lead to female contentment and happiness. In other words, when abusive behavior is portrayed as acceptable or even desirable in romantic relationships, it sends a message to viewers or readers that such behavior is normal and acceptable. This can be especially harmful to young or impressionable audiences who may not have a clear understanding of healthy relationships. By romanticizing abusive behavior, the media can create confusion about the importance of consent in romantic relationships. If characters are shown to ignore or override their partner's wishes or boundaries, it can send the message that consent is not important or necessary. When abuse is portrayed as romantic or even trivialized, it can downplay the serious emotional and physical harm that abuse can cause. This can lead to victims feeling like their experiences are not valid or important. Romanticizing abuse in the media can reinforce harmful gender stereotypes, such as the idea that men are dominant and women are submissive, or that jealousy and possessiveness are signs of love. This can perpetuate harmful power dynamics in relationships and contribute to the perpetuation of gender-based violence.
So there's been a very important conversation happening in light of all of these horrific wedding vows by grooms. You know that I vow to smack that ass and keep my belly full and my balls empty. Oh, I feel like I just guaranteed getting flagged. But the conversation centers on, does showcasing these nightmares enable the men who are, well, less of a nightmare to skirt by? Because, you know, they're not as bad. And to me, this conversation serves as a reminder as to why it's so important to decenter men and decenter romance. We should not be comparing a man's actions against other men to figure out whether or not it's shitty. When we center men, it's very easy to dismiss bad behavior because, well, that guy is even worse. And I have a rather unorthodox example of this, which if anything will really drive home the importance of centering ourselves and not, just finding a man who treats us right. Now, as some of you guys know, once upon a time, I was married. Now, every guy who came before him was an absolute douchebag. Admittedly, I met him when I was 19, so every guy that came before was, high school dating. And high school boys can be a special brand of terrible. And honestly, it would be more accurate to say high school dating and freshman year of college dating. Oh, I remember the guy who wanted to pretend like we were boyfriend and girlfriend while he rushed his fraternity. Yeah, my history of low self-worth decisions when it came to dating goes all the way back. But anyways, the man who would go on to be my husband was absolutely amazing. For the first time in my life, I was treated with respect and dignity and care. He would do things that, people in the social media world would see as going above and beyond. But even he would say, no, I'm just being a good partner. Now, the very simplified version of the story is after over a decade together, we realized that we had grown into very incompatible people. And we ultimately decided to end the marriage in order to save the friendship. And I will tell you right now, one of the reasons why I tried as hard as I did to make that marriage work, even when it was clear that we weren't working anymore, was because I was still in this headspace of, well, he goes above and beyond. And I will never find a man who treats me that well again. And unfortunately, I definitely carried that energy into my post-marriage dating world. I put up with a lot because instead of seeing how my ex-husband treated me as the bar for entry, I saw it as the exception. I mean, shoot, even in my last relationship, as I was putting up with volatility and disrespect and gaslighting and manipulations, I would tell myself, well, they can't all be like my ex-husband, which I should emphasize right now that that's not me holding a candle for my ex-husband, but seeing his actions as the exception. I was still in a place where I was centering men. And because I was centering men, I was treating dating men like catching a bus. Well, I have to get to that destination somehow, so I guess I'll take the bus that comes my way and then just, make up the difference myself. The days of comparing actions based on stereotypes is over. We no longer do the, oh, well, he's a guy. What did you expect? Well, you know how men are. Just be happy he likes you. Or, dismissing disrespect because he's not vowing to smack that ass at the altar. Or dismissing abuse because he hasn't hit you yet. My 2 cents, I love that we are putting dudes like that on blast. Because if anything, in the past, this was normalized. Like, imagine trying to make a stink about those kind of vows in, say, 2006. You would have been laughed out as a frigid bitch with no sense of humor. So yes, keep taking these dudes to task. There just has to be an important part too to that. And that is using those men as a reminder to center ourselves and decenter men and decenter romance. Because otherwise it is far too easy to do the comparison game. And finding ourselves saying things like, well, yeah, he did leave me 2 angry voice notes in a row, but, it could be worse.
The concept of avoiding romance is rarely acknowledged, as modern romances hinge on the fact that we have internalized and accepted that all men are threats and capable of violence and rape. They all pose a danger to us. We just have to keep kissing frogs until we find one that will eventually turn into a prince if only we're patient enough. The idea of simply opting out of romance and love, of not getting married or finding a partner, simply doesn't come up. Love in heterosexual relationships, marriage, whether official or not, are female destiny according to romance novels, and there's nothing you can do to escape it. You can only mitigate how bad it is. See Charlotte, who would rather marry Mr. Simmons, a man who could never love or satisfy her, or even be somewhat tolerable, than end up a spinster. Funnily enough, women who don't marry or have children are consistently the happiest group in the population. While men get benefits from marriage, taking fewer risks and having a healthier life, the same cannot be said for married women with children, who often put themselves last. But this truth is often hidden, as women are sold the belief that being alone is the worst fate she can attain. We must only think of the spinster or the crazy cat lady to see that. It is interesting that these women are portrayed as unhappy and lonely, but as jokes and warnings at the same time as male loneliness is reported on as an epidemic. Men are not being told to settle for a wife they don't want or to fear aging out of marriageability. We are being warned against them and told that women having higher standards and economic freedom are bad things because it leaves men unable to assume the possibility of marriage, and the resulting sex maid promised to men by heterosexual partnership. These same men are not being told to better themselves in any way, to treat women better, to be kinder, to engage in social hobbies. Instead, women are sold the belief that romance is inevitable and required for satisfaction and happiness. And furthermore, that even those men who are cruel, abusive, or violent can be rehabilitated by a woman who just loves them enough. This dangerous lie places the blame on women by implying that those men who do not become family men, mellow out, become less violent, fail to do so because the women they are with do not love them enough. And what is that, if not romanticizing abuse?